This is your coffee break. Hi, friends. I am here this beautiful evening with Kaitlyn Mirison, who is a writer and who has recently come out with a book. We're going to have what I think is going to be a really great conversation today about what it really means to be an artist and what upholds us not only externally but internally as an artist or a writer. And so, Kaitlyn, would you like to start us off with just a few things about yourself?
Oh, sure. And thank you for having me.
Oh, gosh.
I think, as a child, I always dreamed of being a writer. But then when I reached the age to enter college, I just really doubted that I could do what I dreamed about doing. And so I took some well-intentioned advice, and it was really the only thing my self-doubts would allow me to do, and that is to enter kind of a degree program and career path that I could do, but it never helped me feel alive. And so what I did is I spent many years in an accounting executive role, and decided several years ago it was time to just kind of take this leap and figure out what was really inside of me, because the way it felt to be living just didn't feel real. It didn't feel authentic. It felt like I was standing kind of on the sidelines of my life. And so I kind of, I took that leap and went part-time there and just started exploring different things. It's been a really winding path these past several years, I can say.
Oh, I bet.
But earlier this year, when I started writing my book, that's when I felt like I was coming home.
I love that. I love that feeling, that coming home. Can you tell me more about that?
Yeah. So, it's a level of peace that I feel that really is beyond words. And as a writer, I'm not sure that's a great thing, but, it's like you mentioned before we started recording that it had snowed a bunch the week before. And it's like that, those mornings or those moments when there isn't anything you can do. Like you're completely just snuggled in, whatever that case may be. And so you can't push yourself to do anything differently, and except to just be present in that moment. And I know for myself, when I've experienced those moments of being snowed in, or there's a storm, or whatever the case may be, that I'm just at this calm state of, there isn't anything else I can do about this in this moment. So I'm just going to be and be present. And it's that sense of like, there's a surrendering to that, but also this, instead of seeking approval outside of myself. So instead of looking externally to get to a certain place, to push myself to be on a certain ladder, to take a certain step, all of a sudden what was happening as I was writing and really embracing that part of me, it just sort of kept unfolding. And in the unfolding, it was like coming inward. So it was almost like like a flower, like coming inward, but it wasn't coming inward and like dying. It was coming inward and like coming alive. You know how a dandelion, kind of blooms the first time as this yellow flower, and then it folds into itself, but it's still this strong plant that's living, and it continues to unfold, and it's a completely new flower. It looks completely different. And I can say that's what's been happening.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. I've been nodding this whole time that you've been saying that. I think that a lot of people listening to this are going to identify with that feeling. I love that, of folding in and rediscovering yourself.
That's what it was. Has been.
Oh,
Continues.
I'm so glad. And I hope it does continue. And that's a beautiful metaphor for that feeling.
Thank you.
I love that. I love the idea of the snowed in. What a beautiful metaphor. I always say that I think I write better when it's raining. And, you always try to figure out, is it the white noise? Is it, whatever? I think it's a little bit like your snowed in metaphor of being in a calm state, of realizing you can't go outside and do all those, gardening chores and stuff you have to do. You have to stay inside and you have to be present, and you have to just be okay with existing. I think that those limiting of your choices, whether it be snowed in or if it's raining outside or what have you, there's something really beautiful and magical and like you said, centering about that. So thank you for sharing that. Oh my gosh.
I think in a way it's like the, life and the environment gave permission to write.
Yes.
When it storms, it's like, you have permission from the external world. Go ahead, write.
Oh my gosh, that is so true. And like the whole time you were saying that, I was just nodding. I know you can't see me, but I was just nodding with this big dopey smile on my face because I know that feeling and I love that feeling and I love thinking about it as coming home. I want to ask about something that you mentioned in your introduction. You said you received some well-intentioned advice. And it sounded like that advice was maybe to, you said accounting, work in accounting?
Correct. Yeah.
Can you tell me more about that? And
Sure. So, and I'll preface this with that I do think the accounting field is a great career path. I have worked with people that thrive in it, and you can just see like their eyes light up, and it's just awesome. However, it doesn't do that for me. But at that time in my life, 18 years old, trying to make those big decisions on what I was going to study and looking at it at that time of what am I going to do for the rest of my life? I mean, that just felt so big. So, family around me and some teachers who just saw some inherent skills that I have that can translate as far as like being organized and detail oriented and those types of things can translate into that type of field. They pinpoint those. And also, and I understand from those that love you, it can be scary to say, the creative path is really just inherently uncertain. Mm-hmm. And so this career path, accounting has some very known steps. You take certain classes, you take certain exams. Here's a particular career path that you can follow. Everyone needs accountants, those types of things. Mm-hmm. And so it became safe advice when, someone in your close-knit sphere is looking at you as being, gosh, she's nervous about making, these decisions. What kind of advice can I give to help calm that decision, and also looking at certain skill sets and their, and just wanting that person that you care about to be secure in life, however that's defined.
Yeah.
And so I think all of those dynamics came into play. And really, I was in a place of, I talked about being, centered in myself and everything. And I didn't feel that at that time. I didn't feel strong enough to really go against advice I was receiving. Mm-hmm. Even if I felt inside it wasn't what I really wanted to do, I didn't feel I could stand up to that. And I don't necessarily feel like I would have had to fight and debate. That's not how my family environment was. Mm-hmm. But at the same point, there was some level of, I would have had to go against what was being, advice given to me. And that, as someone who doesn't like to elect to join in conflict, I didn't have the internal strength to do that and then go on my own path.
I gotcha. And you know what? I think, again, what you're saying resonates so much with me. I was always a creative person. In my first job out of college, I got a corporate job that, but that's what you feel you need to do. I'm curious. So if you were in that same position, what advice would you give yourself at that age?
I definitely learned a lot of valuable lessons. I would not give that same advice to me. I think what I've learned, I've now been able to gain a lot better understanding as far as what I do share in my book and just in relating with different people. I can say I'd rather have learned that in different ways. But at the same time, I think, looking at that stage in my life, I would actually inform myself that I didn't need to make a decision. I could have, instead explore, take different classes. Don't make a decision at that point. at 18 years old or whenever if you're in a place, no matter what age you are, if the decision feels that heavy and uncertain, you don't have to make a decision. Explore different options and pay attention to what really lights you up, what really gets you excited, what really looks like, gosh, this is something I could see myself getting really, delving into and maybe exploring for a level of mastery, or whatever the case may be. So that's what I would recommend, is take the pressure off of making a decision, because you don't have to.
I love that. And it's something that nobody ever tells you, because we're trained to be decisive and we're trained to do that. Oh my gosh. You made a transition after you decided that maybe you were not in a position that was maybe not the right fit for you. And I think we've all been there. And you talked about standing up against something, or maybe the courage or the strength. How did you find that strength or that courage, or how did it dawn on you that you could do something else, that you could live a more fulfilling life?
A lot of it came to a point where I couldn't go any further. Like, I was feeling so down and depressed in a way, and also suppressed, like just this really heavy feeling of being held down, And just as I spent more time with, okay, what is going on? What's the underlying, the core, what's the very core of things? And I just started exploring, talking with different folks and going on like informational interviews and just having conversations with folks and seeing how people were living outside of what was my normal day-to-day life. And I started seeing, other people are really doing this. I would read about different things in magazines, but that felt so removed from my world, from my interactions, because those people they were in print or they were on video or something like that. They were so removed from my world. And so what I started to do was engage with folks that were just outside of my sphere. So I started volunteering a lot in different organizations and talking to different folks and just seeing different ways that they lived. And it gave me permission to start exploring more. And so at first for me, it took getting permission from the external world to just see like, okay, it's okay for me to kind of do this. And I did struggle a lot with just that it was okay for me. Like, I could definitely say, oh, it's definitely okay for anyone else, but it took me for quite a while to go, but I'm okay. It's okay for me too. That also kind of butted up against some other complexities and my own self-doubts, and getting to the core of, once I started seeing that level, okay, I'm seeing that there is permission, in the world to kind of live your own path and do things that, really make you thrive internally. Why am I struggling to believe that it is okay for me when anyone that sits in front of me or talks to me, I would say, absolutely, it is for you, for you to do that. So I started really trying to dig down and get into the core things that were occurring within me. And I took I researched myself to say that I started writing a lot, journaling, and writing a lot of, okay, what's the pattern that I'm seeing? What is going on? What belief? What's the limiting thoughts or the thoughts that are coming, and what's their patterns? When am I being really triggered with my self-doubts? And just started looking at the patterns to see what it was. And I started really recognizing at the very core, I didn't believe that I was valuable as a person. That I really was just insignificant. And in order to have any significance or value, I needed to be something different than who I was. And so in coming to that realization, it was hard to recognize that, because at the same time, I just wanted to hug myself. It was like, oh, I'm so sorry, for realizing that. And it just started with that, and there was kind of like, in getting to that understanding and awareness, there was also this little glimpse of like hope that, just maybe that belief is wrong. Just maybe. And as I kept being with that maybe, it helped me kind of hold the door open for the possibility that what I want to do and contribute in the world, and really that if I didn't do anything and didn't contribute anything, that doesn't diminish my value as a person in any way. Really going in and just hitting that place of there was no way for me to keep going forward, because I wasn't going to be able to go forward unless I took the time to really go inward and get to the very core of things.
Oh my gosh. First of all, I applaud you for doing that. That takes a level of self-awareness that I think a lot of us maybe don't have, or don't know that we have, or don't know to seek out, or don't feel like we have permission to seek out. And so I'm so glad you did that. I struggle with self-worth. I think a lot of writers struggle with that. We're quiet, we're introverted, and we don't see ourselves as maybe bombastic earth shakers, or we don't have permission to do that stuff. I know I'm a very obedient person by nature, and so it is really hard to say, like, yeah, you can do this. You can start out, So thank you for sharing that with me. I was just, I once again, I was vehemently nodding, but I also got a little choked up because that just resonated so deeply.
Thank you. But I think you bring up a really wonderful point in that for folks that tend to be more quiet and appreciate the quietness, and we were here talking with writers, is that you go into that quiet space to do that. There's so much value in what you share in those thoughts. The quiet allows you to put together letters that bring about so much meaning for people. I know there's been, words that I've read at just the right exact time that I needed to hear them, and someone took the time to express that. That is immeasurable. And I think that is a form of being charismatic in its own way.
I think you're right. And it's being charismatic, and it's being like a very quiet type of extrovert. And it also, I don't know, it's also a type of, not necessarily self-sacrifice, but of deep charity. Not charity like, oh, I'm going to throw $1 into your coffee can, but just giving of yourself. And that is immensely beautiful.
It really is.
Oh, you were in a bad place, and you had some very, very deep, very provoking realizations, and you kind of, instead of ignoring them, you allowed yourself within the possibility of exploring some of the things that you were thinking and some of the doubts about, your lack of self-worth or whatever, how you measured that. And you wrote a book. Did you, and you had taken some classes and such, and was The Artist's Pillars, which is the book that I'm familiar with, was that your first book?
It is my first book, yes.
Tell me what moved you to go from sort of that internal blooming, so to speak, that internal self-discovery, to wanting and desiring to write a book that would then share your experiences with others.
It's interesting when that internal blooming is really taking form and kind of strengthening within itself. My experience was that it became this natural desire to want to extend externally. So it was almost like, it reaches the point of like, I've done what I need to internally. And I say that I'm continuing to grow internally. So I don't mean that. But at that point, it's like, it's bloomed, so now it needs to be in the world. And just as I started experiencing the results and feeling what I felt and what I keep experiencing, I'm like, I want to share this with other folks. I know how bad it feels on the other side. And, if I can share what's inside of me and create this resource for folks who it resonates with, I want it to be there. And so that in itself became a drive. There's just certain things that have just made a big impact for my own life. And I want that to be there for others, if it resonates with them. And, it was so amazing in writing the book itself, and that it's such a beautiful thing in writing when it seems like it's somewhat disjointed, what you're writing. And just the process is like kind of all over the place. And all of a sudden, it's like the spider's web that just all of a sudden things start connecting. And I started recognizing that. So when I started the book, I felt like I'd already journaled a lot. I'd already kind of downloaded a bunch of information, and I felt like I had a good core of where things were going. But in the writing of it itself, I made even more discoveries of my own path, of things that I'd learned. And then the layers kept going. I started learning even more. Well, I wrote this book earlier this year and then published it myself in August. I continue to read it. I think because it's it's a practice of just practicing these things that I've learned that have helped, these kind of fundamentals. And I think that that's another piece, is that it becomes, when we write something down, it becomes grounded. It takes form. And so we can see it even more. At least that's how it works for me. So in writing this book, all this that was inside of me kind of took even a stronger form that I'm able to go back to and remind myself and learn on a new layer. All of that just became that underlying driving force to continue through the creative process to get it out in the world.
You are very insightful. I wish I had all of your wisdom. That was just so beautifully said. So this book that you wrote, you wrote it to ground your words, to help others, to help yourself. Would you mind telling us a little bit about the premise of your book and a little bit of what it's about?
Sure. And so like you mentioned, it's titled An Artist's Pillars, and it's really written specifically for folks that they have something they want to create, but feel held back by their own self-doubts. And so they're feeling it's, the next step they need to take just feels really impossible. And so what I share through the book is just different fundamentals that I've learned in order to believe in yourself and give what you want to create an opportunity to exist. And so through it, I'm not promising that self-doubts go away. And in fact, not at all. But what I've experienced that happens is that you change your relationship with self-doubts. And so the way that they cripple you doesn't occur anymore. And one of the things that I share in the book, I call them pillars. I've, identified kind of 4 pillars is where I focus on in the book. And so one of them is called tenderness. And that's treating yourself with compassion and understanding. I know, when I've tried to force myself to believe in myself or take a step, you may hear different advice that says, well, you just have to believe in yourself. You just have to. Well, if you are someone that feels kind of this sense of dread and hopelessness because when you hear that phrase, you don't believe in yourself, it really can be even more debilitating. And so within that, framework of tenderness is that, our inner critic shows up. That voice, it shows up. But instead of taking the words that occur so literally or trying to force it away and push it away and suppress it, because, that's not a form of tenderness for yourself. It's allowing it, because in allowing it and allowing yourself to hear and to really hear it deeper, you actually then allow all parts of yourself to exist. And so instead of anytime I've tried to, suppress a part of me, whether that's my inner critic or feelings or whatever the case may be, I'm sending a subtle message to my psyche that part of me is not okay. But in doing that, there's part of me that wonders, well, what other parts of me do I feel are not okay? And so it just creates this, vicious pattern of self-doubts and insecurities really taking over your life. And so instead, what I share in the book is to change the relationship and, allow all those parts in. And so when I mention hear deeper, look at what the patterns are. Don't get hung up on the words themselves, but look at what the patterns are. When is your inner critic showing up? What is the common language that keeps being brought about? And ask, what is the message here? Because that's all part of our human inner language, what's occurring, our feelings, the sensations, inner critic, that's all communicating to us. And, I'll just kind of pause for a second. The creative process, it does highlight our insecurities, but it's not meant to beat you down. It's really here to ask you to step into who you fully are. And that's the same thing with our inner critic. They're just delivering messages, and it's a heightened form of a message to show what beliefs you were carrying that hold you back. And so in seeing those patterns and asking, okay, what is my inner critic trying to teach me? What is it trying to highlight to me in a way that's holding me back? And to hear what that message is gives you the power to then decide if you want to continue to believe that, or if you want to work with that to then move forward. And to give an example of that, putting this book together and writing it, it's vulnerable to put it out there. There's so much of me in it,
Yeah.
And with any writing, whether you're writing fiction, I mean, there's so much of you in that's your imagination, coming to life. So the expression of writing and everything is just vulnerable. Being that exposed triggered a lot of self-doubts for me through the process. And so, I had to do my own work. And in that, I realized that I was believing that all the T's had to be crossed, all the I's dotted, in order for people to find the book valuable. And when I recognized that, I realized that, I was continuing to hold myself back. And I didn't need to do one more read through and one more edit. I'd already done enough to where I felt like I could answer the question, is this a quality product? And as long as I felt I could answer that yes versus, is it perfect? Is it a quality product? When I could say yes, then it was time. And where the value is in me sharing it. And perfect, that's perfect, is in sharing it. So it didn't, all the T's and all the I's, they may not be dotted and crossed. It may not be perfect grammar, but it was time.
Yeah.
The material was ready. I was ready. And so my inner critic, while it wasn't pleasant, but when I started listening to it and hearing it as a friend, what is the message you're giving me? Versus, oh my gosh, those words really hurt. This, I can't go forward. Okay, what is the message here? It changes things, and it actually helped me stop my own perfectionist drive. And so within the book, that's something I go into further as far as, okay, how do you hear the messages? How do you calm yourself when you're in those moments and feeling anxious and your heart is closing and you're, and pounding? How do you do that? How do you get yourself into a calm place that allows yourself to then hear? You mentioned self-awareness. That is such a big thing, in that I don't mean you need to have that first. Once I started recognizing the interlocking links there of everything, that was the awareness I needed to go, is that the way I want to continue with this? And so you don't need to have the awareness before you sit with these types of materials. I'm not saying you need to do all that kind of work, but it's in the process itself. It's in asking those questions. It's in relating with yourself and relating and engaging with your internal dialogue and internal personal conversation that then you gain the awareness. And what's beautiful is once you start, in that moment, you gain one level. And it may be in a month as you continue in that dialogue and just relating with yourself in a different way, you gain another level. And it just keeps in somewhat unraveling, but also unfolding and blooming in all new ways.
You talked before about building those layers, and this is maybe a more detailed way of doing that.
Yeah.
We've talked a little bit about self-doubt and insecurity, and I love your idea of making your self-doubt a friend. I feel like I just took a college course. I kind of want to send you this picture. While you were talking, I took these notes, and I have a full page of scribbly, scrabbly notes that I took while you were talking, and there's arrows and stars and all sorts of doodles all over the place. And
thank you. That's a tremendous compliment.
Yeah, you know, when you need to take notes when someone else is speaking, that they're saying something, worth keeping. And so, wow, Kaitlyn, this is amazing. Thank you so, so much for your time today. I I have one more question, and then technically I have 1,000 more questions for you. But I definitely want to do this again if that's okay.
Great.
But for today, I have one more question, and that is, what is the best piece of advice you've received from a mentor?
The best advice I would say was to listen within and to give that voice its value. If we ask someone for advice, or sometimes it comes uninvited, for the most part, it is well-intentioned. They mean the best and as far as extending some sort of advice to you. But no one can know the entirety of your experience. No one can know all the different thoughts and dynamics and emotions that you have in your life, or that you take into consideration when you're trying to make, if it's a decision about something in the future for yourself, something you're planning, a relationship, wherever the case may be. But really, no one can know everything that is going on inside of you. And so they're bringing their advice from a very limited standpoint. Mm-hmm. And that's okay. You don't need to disclose everything in order to get advice. But what that means is that you are your best guide. And so it's wonderful to get advice from other folks, get ideas, get insights. What, wisdom have they gained in their life? But then take that in, and what is coming up for you from your own inner voice, and give that its value and weight in your decision making.
Mm-hmm. That is very, very insightful. I'm going to sorry, I'm starting to go into fangirl mode. And so I apologize for that. I'm just whoa.
Oh, thank you. I mean, it really, your enthusiasm and support is very much a compliment and an honor. And I can say for anyone out there who gets nervous about sharing what is inside of them, once you start, it's a true testament of how just amazing the experiences become.
Kaitlyn, thank you so much for sharing your experience with us today. You are so insightful, and I can't wait for your podcast to come out, actually. I'm really excited about that
thank you.
to get your voice in my ear once a week. And I imagine when I listen to it, I'm just going to be my mind is just going to be blown every time. Not to put pressure on you, but seriously, you are a treasure. So thank you so much for your time today, for your voice that you've given us. Thank you for giving us permission to be writers and to extend and bloom beyond ourselves. Thank you so much for everything.
Thank you, Sarah, and thank you for all you're doing.
You are welcome.